And what I mean with memory is not just a memory that we can connect to with our mind. What I mean is our soul memory. A few weeks ago, my grandmother passed away, and she has always been someone that is very close to me. And over the last years, I have been active in the Akashic Records. I know what happens when souls cross over, yet when something happens like that in our own lives, it opens up something, and it opens up questions, also realizations. One of those realizations is about soul memories, how we access soul memories and what soul memories actually are. So what I want to go into today is into soul memories and into healing. Why sometimes healing happens instantly and other times it can take time. I also want to go into the non-linear aspect of memories, of healing, and also of grief. So by the end of this recording, I hope that I can give you a perspective of how you could access your own soul memories and why time is not linear and why that is connected to healing and to grief. So if you are new here, my name is Anke. I'm an astrologer, I'm a mystic, and above all, I'm a mother, and I actually combine astrology, the Akashic Records, and light language, and I welcome you here. And if we met before, welcome back. So let's get right into it. We are in the middle of Cancer season, and the Cancer energy, the Cancer archetype is very much connected to memory. And what I mean with memory is not just a memory that we can connect to with our mind or that is located in our brain. What I mean is our soul memory. So it's something that goes much deeper and much further than just what happens in our mental awareness. In a way, it is our unconscious, subconscious memory. And I think a good example to get really into this topic is by explaining that whether you are watching this right now, as that I am posting this during Cancer season, or if this comes on your path in the future, it doesn't really matter, because time is really a concept of our 3D world. But this information will reach you whenever it is part of your soul's path and your soul's evolution. And even if we in our 3D world really feel time, and it is very much a part of our world, especially timing, our consciousness is not limited to time. Our consciousness can move beyond time. And that is exactly what I want to dive into today. And for two different reasons. One is because I've been getting the question of how the Akashic Records work and how we actually access that information. And then the other reason is because of my personal experiences and the feeling of really having been moving through time lately. And I will explain that much further as we go. We all know time to be linear. We are born, we live, and then we die. So everything happens in a specific order. We apply to something, we get hired, we quit. We put an intention into the universe, we wait, we receive, or we don't. So everything happens one thing after another. So we are seeing it in a linear line. And viewing time like this, it is very logical here in this physical world. It makes sense because that's how things grow, right? But now imagine that our past, present, and future is not linear at all. If I ask you that, probably the first thing that your mind is doing is trying to analyze, and your mind cannot really get a grip onto that, because questions that can come up are like, if everything happens now, then what have I already experienced and what is yet to be experienced? What are the possibilities that are still coming? And if that is true, if everything happens right here and right now, then what is actually happening in this moment? What is the experience that is unfolding now? These questions can really create this mind trick. But what I have come to understand over the last years entering the Akashic Records is that time doesn't necessarily happen like this, not in a linear line, but it's actually discs stacked upon each other. So we have past, present, future, or the other way around. Future, present, it doesn't really matter. The thing is that it is above each other, below each other, next to each other. It's basically like this infinity and then also vertical. And so if our consciousness is not limited to time and just our body and our physical 3D experience is limited to time, so does that then mean that the persona simply ends when we die within this lifetime? And that's not how I see it. What happens is that a disc just simply stops being active in this timeline and in this moment, but we can still access that disc because it doesn't really disappear. It's just not physically available in that moment. And it's the exact same with a past life still being available. Many people experience past lives through past life regressions or dreams or just an instant knowing of a past life. So we know that our consciousness can still access that. And in a way, that is exactly the same for all information that is available of all the experiences that we have as multidimensional beings, meaning beyond this lifetime. And that is exactly what we find in the records, an infinite information of everything that exists beyond time, as time is all stacked in those different discs, one upon another. And this is exactly something that I experienced with my grandmother crossing over, is that yes, we do both still very much exist. Our consciousness is still there and still connected, yet we are not in our physical bodies standing in the same timeline anymore. But it doesn't mean that one doesn't exist anymore. And so what I would like to explain a little bit further is that what happens when I access the Akashic Records for someone else. Because many times I have heard that people go into the Akashic Records and they see it as an infinite library, and there are all these shelves and people can access books. And I think that makes a lot of sense, but that is not necessarily how I experience it to be. So for me, when I go into the Akashic Records, it's not a linear line with books. I'm not flipping through books. I am actually experiencing it as everything happening at the same moment, and sometimes that's above, below, sideways. It's just your consciousness expanding beyond experiencing time as linear. And then tapping into the experiences that our soul essence is having all at the same time, which could be a past life, which could be a future life, which could be parallel. From my perspective, we call it past lives because it makes so much more sense for our linear thinking. And that is why when I speak of soul memory, I'm speaking of something bigger than a past life, which does also include a past life, because our soul essence is not necessarily experiencing things sequential. Our soul essence is experiencing everything simultaneously. But while we are incarnated and while we are really here, that is not necessarily how we experience it. And what I do find important to mention, because with going through all of this, you might wonder what makes that different from conditioning or from childhood experiences and from patterns that really came through the experiences that we have through this lifetime. And for me, those are also very much real. Some things really come from ancestral conditioning or from our childhood experiences. So we can usually locate those with our conscious memory. But in other moments, when we are affected by something that we cannot find a conscious memory or an experience in this lifetime for, but we can still very much feel it, that is where soul memory comes in. So not everything is necessarily connected to things that happen beyond our current timeline or beyond our current incarnation. It is very much connected to what we have experienced, and we can locate them. But when we can't, that is when it is interesting to dive deeper into the unconscious memory and into the soul memory that is connected to experiences beyond our current incarnation. And working with our soul memory is not to bypass our current life's work. If anything, it is really to ground us into our current life's work. And it is to ground us into our experience, to really bring the things from the unconscious into our conscious awareness so that we can work with them and so that we have the possibility to mute it. because many times when we are just walking through the street and we are living our lives, we are not, in those moments, we do not have a crystal clear memory, or at least many of us don't have a crystal clear memory of what is happening beyond our current incarnation. And that is when this work becomes very relevant, because our body and our nervous system and the way we act and our behavior is being affected by those soul memories that we cannot access in that moment. Soul memory is not just connected to the brain, it's not connected to our conscious memory, to our mind, and it's not just connected to this lifetime and this timeline. And that brings me actually to a question that I often get as well, which is about healing. So if time doesn't really exist and we can access our soul memories, then why, when we access our soul memories, do we not heal instantly? And why sometimes healing still takes a lot of time, even if time doesn't really exist? One way to look at that is through frequency, because frequency meets frequency. So even if something is then available in our conscious mind because we have connected to our soul memory and we pull in those experiences and we really know them, it doesn't mean that we have integrated them. So meaning there is still this frequency mismatch. And then the healing part becomes actually integrating that and making sure that the frequency meets each other. In order to attune to that frequency, there are different ways to do that. The way I work with it is through the records and through light language. And I will explain a little bit with what I mean with that. So when I go into the Akashic Records and I see certain blocks, I see certain vows or contracts that were made beyond this lifetime, I bring them from the unconscious into the conscious. Then the information flows again, as in when something is in the unconscious and it is, in a way you can say it as hidden or it's not directly available, it cannot really move, it just stays there. But once we bring it into the consciousness, it can move. Sometimes just knowing about it is enough to release it, and we can do Akashic. Other times it takes time through integration and frequency meeting frequency. What I often see as well is that, yes, we bring the information into the conscious awareness, and that triggers actually the path of healing. So then the healing circle really starts, because whenever we get a piece of information, that triggers in a way and unlocks the door into something else again. And that is why I personally find it always interesting to work with people, because sometimes people can help us unlock those doors. Yes, we do all the work from within and everything is within us, but other people can really act as mirrors for us and help us unlock those doors. And so the other way that I work with it is through light language and light codes. And this is a topic in itself, but I do want to mention it briefly because it is so much connected to soul memory. Why I want to mention it is because we are speaking a lot about the conscious memory, like the mind, and going beyond the mind to unlock those soul memories. And the one thing that does that instantly is actually light language and light codes. So what happens is that it bypasses the mind completely. So working with light language, what I have been noticing is that rather than receiving the information for someone, is that the person during the light language transmission has the experience themselves. And sometimes what happens is that they cannot fully make sense of it via the mind, but they feel it in their body and something shifts within them. And that is because it goes beyond the mind. There is no way of the mind analyzing it or making sense of it, and it's not needed. So in a way, you could call that a leap. And that is one of the reasons why I love working with light language. And in another recording, I will go more into depth into this specific topic. So coming back to the question, why sometimes healing still does take a lot of time. And that is actually the gap between our soul memories and our mind, our 3D persona. So the person that we are in this life is still catching up to what the soul already knows. And that gap is actually then the healing process and the circle. So bringing this back to the beginning of this conversation, which was that it is currently Cancer season. And in Cancer season, we usually really reflect back on what has happened in the past, our ancestors, our memories. And especially now that during Cancer season, Mercury is also retrograde in Cancer. So it's literally a time to rethink, reevaluate, and restructure however we think, however our memories show up for us. And sometimes people are so surprised with the things that I remember from the past. I am a double Cancer. I'm a Cancer sun and I'm a Cancer rising. So sometimes people really wonder, like, how do you still know that? It has been years ago. And the fact is that I do not always know it just from the mind, because Cancers really feel. So what I remember from the memory is mostly what it made me feel like. Through that feeling, I can recall the rest of the story. And so, with my personal experience of having to say goodbye to my grandmother, who has been with me my whole life, and very literally going back into my ancestral line, into my memories, and really diving deep into this, into my roots of how I grew up, it really made me wonder what stays with us and what leaves. Within our spiritual practices, we really have a lot of information about this, but that doesn't mean that when we go through it, that we don't feel it, or that it matters less, or that we have to intellectualize it. I feel like, to me, it's very important to really do feel it, and to sometimes stand still with the fact that we are very much humans, and that we have this human experience, and that feeling is one of our human superpowers. Cancer season is truly reminding that. And so we have been speaking a lot about memories. And the other day I heard someone say that if we keep reliving memories of someone that is no longer with us, if that is pulling us into the past, if that means that we are not fully present in the here and now, that really made me think, because to me it's not like that. Whenever we relive certain moments of our loved ones, and we do really go into our memory, in those moments we are connecting to their soul essence. And their soul essence is not limited to time. That soul essence is how they are still alive within us. To me, that is not something negative, and that doesn't pull us away from the here and now, and that doesn't make us less present. That actually is our consciousness moving beyond time and really connecting with soul essence, consciousness to consciousness. And every time that we go again into reliving those memories and connecting to those memories, it becomes a little bit less painful, because yes, sometimes memories, as beautiful as they are, can sometimes be painful, because we connect to something that we can no longer connect with in our physical 3D life. And that can create this feeling of longing in a way. But when we remind ourselves that we can connect to that soul essence, and that is how they still are alive with us, that makes the grief, and I think that is how grief is non-linear, because that connection is still there, and that connection is still alive. And so when I said in the beginning that I've been feeling that I've been traveling through time, that is exactly what I meant. Because some days I am very much connected to the memories, like to the linear memories of how have I been growing up, and like having those memories of fun things like sitting in a dining table or going together to the forest. And other times I feel that I'm connected to a soul essence part, where it feels more than just a memory. And that is what I mean, that yes, time is not linear, but grief is neither linear, and they are very much connected to each other. And then having the gratitude of having those memories, of being able to go into your soul memories and then connecting them all together. And that is really the heart of what I wanted to share here today, of how we can access our soul memories, and how accessing your soul memories can really help you in terms of healing, in terms of grief, and how different layers of consciousness are giving us different angles and different perspectives. With that being said, if you are wondering about your own soul memories and about your own path, that is exactly what a Soul Akashic Records session is for. I will put the link here. If you want more information, if you want to connect, I'm always happy to hear from you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.